thanks to Borko, George, and BoonThai, who are CXOs from SAP, IBM, and Microsoft, and they are going to talk about the value proposition. What is the importance of the value proposition, how to identify them, how to quantify them, and so on and so forth, right? And why value proposition is very important, because we all know that, when startups are building the product and they are trying to sell them, if they don't have the right story, if they don't have the right value proposition quantified and defined, then it is very difficult to convince your potential investors, customers, or partners. It's extremely crucial to have the value proposition defined as early as possible in the process. So that's why we have the experts today to talk about their experiences, their learning, and what insights they have for the startups. So I'll get into the panel, and first I would love to, I would request you to do your intro. So probably I can start with George. George, would you like to do a quick intro for the team?
Sure. I hope the connection is better and audible.
It is fantastic.
Okay, thanks. So thanks, Pankaj, for inviting me, and very nice to meet all of you on the call. I see we have a very cozy group. I started my prep with Pankaj last week saying, I'm always envious talking. First of all, I love talking to folks like you guys, but I'm also very envious, right? Why I say that? Pankaj would laugh because, all you guys are millionaires or potential millionaires. So every time I talk to you, I always go away feeling very depressed. So, but I also learn a lot. So just by way of breaking the ice. But so nice to meet all of you. So I run marketing for IBM here in ASEAN. I've been with them about 15 years. So I run a team that spans across 6 countries. We are responsible for the entire gamut of marketing services, from segmentation to demand generation to advocacy. Prior to that, I was with SAP. And Borko, I was on your side of the universe before I came to IBM. So, that was my alumni as well. The unusual fact is that actually the only thing I knew about IT before I came into this and made it a career was, the only thing I knew about it was to turn on and turn off the computer. Because my first job was as a bureaucrat in the Singapore government doing economic policy. So just a little trivia for you. So my short 30 seconds.
Thanks a lot, George. Borko? Please unmute yourself.
Sorry about this. Zoom is giving me a hard time. I mean, next time we do a meeting on Teams, I think Zoom has a policy against Microsoft employees. So for sure, there's something going on here. Okay, so as Pankaj mentioned, my name is Borko. I run the marketing and operations in Microsoft Singapore. It's like a chief operating officer role for managing internal sales and marketing, and also working closely on strategic initiatives. So everything that's not account management, direct sales, care of. I'm with Microsoft for about 15 years now. So I've joined in a very different life, very different stage of the company growth. And also the whole tech space was very different back then, like 15 years ago. I do have some tech background. I'm an engineer, and I was a mix of developer and sysadmin and whatever. I mean, you need to do everything when you're starting a career. So you need to know some PowerShell scripts. You also need to know some Java. And but I quickly pivoted towards, product management, business management, and eventually landed in a set of roles which are more kind of business management and operations, as well as how do you run a P&L, essentially. So I've been in Singapore for 6 years now, and I really enjoy the landscape. As George mentioned, I do envy you guys as well, and I really love the passion that I see in this space, which is one of the reasons why I'm connected to VCs and startups, and why I incubate this kind of partnerships in the Singapore team as well. So I'm really looking forward to the discussion today.
Fantastic. Thanks a lot, Borko. BoonThai?
Last, hopefully not least, Hi everyone, my name is BoonThai. I actually started a little bit like Borko. I was an software engineer, so I spent the first half of my career writing and developing software. In fact, I was one of the architects for Concur when we designed our first cloud platform. That was actually near year 2000, before there was even cloud. Nowadays, software as a service, cloud, this sort of consumption model is pretty common. But back then, it was we were strange to everyone, and we were right next to Microsoft actually as well. And then, I got bored of sitting in front of a computer all day long. Programming is too predictable for me, and I told my boss, we have nothing in Asia Pac, so they sent me over to Hong Kong to start Concur in Asia Pac. And ever since then, for the last 12 years, I've been, signing customer up, building the business from me as a single person to a few thousand people in Concur nowadays in Asia Pac. So it was a really hard journey for me, starting everything from scratch. And the sad thing for me is, kind of to just resonate what George and Borko is saying. I was a paid employee, but I was pretty much starting a business. Everything from developing the software for local requirements to hiring people, to cold calls, to running marketing, running a P&L, and working 90 hours a week. Like I was a paid employee, so I don't get a lot of the upside. And I envy you guys for being in position to have the upside. But obviously, there's some very minimal risk, right? If startups fail. So I definitely encourage people to start up. Going through my own experience, I know that it's all about not willing to give up, having the right value proposition, which is what this topic is about, and relentless and unyielding in execution, right?
Fantastic. Thanks a lot, BoonThai. So I think conclusion so far is that everybody wants to build a startup because there are humongous upsides involved with that. So I know that, if given a choice, we all can talk about value proposition for probably hours and hours, right? But we'll try to ask as many relevant questions as possible in next, 45 to 50 minutes. So I'll start with my first question. Why is it so crucial to define value proposition, and then obviously quantify the value proposition? But I'll start with the defining value proposition, and I'll start with BoonThai.
This is not a question, right? This is a book that you're asking for an answer on. I would probably change a little bit and say that, the reason why you want to have a value proposition is because you're trying to get someone convinced to buy something from you. So value is in the eye of the beholder. It's what the other person agrees to. So what you're doing is, while you're trying to say, here's what I do, ultimately, you're trying to convince the other party to buy from you. The value proposition, I guess you have a value proposition if you have a concept. The question is whether or not it lands, whether or not you're articulating in a way that the other person understands, right? So it's about what you're solving for this person, what's his roles and responsibility, how much is it worth for him to solve this problem, and really, as Borko alluded to, there's Teams, there's Zoom. So what's the alternative, right? Like there's probably a lot of free meeting software as well, right? So people have choices. Why do they need to do it? And doing nothing is a choice as well, right? Just because you say there's no alternative out there doesn't mean that you have to have a solution, right? So I just think that these are all important things to consider.
Fantastic. George, what is your opinion? I know you wanted to really focus on separating these questions out, identifying and quantifying. Please go ahead.
Hey, thanks, Pankaj. No, I think BoonThai set us off very nicely. I think it's. I like to kind of give a different perspective around value prop, right? And I think to me, this is a struggle. I say struggle because it's not easy. As a CMO, I'm always challenging my teams because IBM competes with. I was joking before all of you started. Which company does not compete with IBM? Right. So I was joking with BoonThai when we started the call that it's a constant uphill battle to refine and sharpen value prop. So my two perspectives is as follows, right? I think number one, the existence or lack of a value prop is already defined upfront when you start your idea. There are tons of ideas out there, and I've got the privilege, as I said, to network with a lot of startups, developers. There's no shortage of ideas. But the problem is, does every idea translate to a real value driver? So let me share a story. Let me share two short stories, right? These are real stories, right? To bring home the point. The first story is this startup was really into IoT, right? So he came onto an IBM cloud program. We gave them 10,000 a month to go knock yourselves out. They loved with the idea. They came up with this fantastic solution about plugging water wastage from a tap in a dormitory to save the real estate developer tons of money. Makes sense. Makes a lot of sense. But what happened is after a few weeks, doesn't even reach a month, something came up and they decided to shelve the idea altogether. Does anybody know why? Let me just take a 5-second live poll. This is an IoT solution trying to plug leakage from taps in a dormitory. Okay, let me give the answer. The answer was some smart guy came out and said, why are you guys so complicated? Just put a self-stopping faucet. You press the faucet, 5 seconds later it stops. Why do you need IoT? Who's going to pay for the device? Who's going to do the usage-based charging? So on and so forth. That's the first story. Second story, this is a real startup as well. 5-8 years ago, this guy came to us as well. Like BoonThai say, before cloud was really mainstream. They were in a commodities trading business. So this guy was an up-and-coming American Korean. So he sat with us, and he said, look, right, I've got this problem. I see a gap in the market. And the gap in the market today is whenever I ship all my commodities, whether it's copper, oil, or whatever, I cannot figure out when the darn thing is going to reach Amsterdam or any destination. So what this guy did was that he reverse engineered that gap. And he looked at what he could do to better predict ETA of vessels carrying commodities. So we worked with him. As some of you know, we bought the weather company. He took our weather insights API. He did use some of our Watson discovery capability, ingested huge amounts of data. And by that time, guys, that was like 8-9 years ago. It was all paper and pen. They know everything paper and pen. So they digitized all the paper. They threw it into this big black box called Watson Discovery API. And he churned out, combining Google Maps and all that, predicted the best route for the vessels in the shortest ETA. So why did I tell you all these two stories, right? The first story is that story never was a stillbirth after 3 weeks. But the second story, this company is now on live page and many of the shippers are using this solution. So what am I trying to say in these two stories? The value proposition itself must plug a gap in the market. If your idea is able to do that and you have resonance to it, writing the value prop is not that difficult. So that's my first perspective, as I share to all of you millionaires and potential millionaires. You probably know this, but I think it's important. Don't create a value prop for the sake of it. If your solution or idea plugs the gap, it jumps at you. The second thought I have on value prop is, I think BoonThai alluded to that, which I think is very, very important. And I always beat my guys up, right, when they show me value prop. Who are you talking to? The value prop, depending on who the target audience is very important. And how you write and shape that value prop would either mean an eye-opening experience for that particular contact or that role, or he will look at you and say, why does that matter to you? So I think target audience is very important. And I'll leave with one example. We always hear this everywhere. Drive agility and productivity within your organization and improve customer satisfaction. We hear this everywhere. So if you throw that kind of value prop out there,
you can sell everything. It applies to everything.
and it doesn't say anything. It doesn't say anything, right? You can put a Microsoft tagline there, you put an IBM logo, you can put a Concur logo. Everybody will say that. But how do you differentiate? How do you quantify, right? So let me stop there.
No, that is fantastic. These are fantastic insights. So I'll come to Borko about quantification, the process of quantifying the value proposition, right? And I think George and BoonThai mentioned pretty clearly that it has to be articulated, it has to be customized based on your target audience, right? So Borko, what is your opinion on the process of quantifying the value proposition, how to modify that based on the audience?
Okay, I'll build on the second part of what George was talking about, because I think it's critical that you understand your audience. Most startups, starting from having a great idea or being very passionate about their products, and then the ones that do succeed, starting from a product-centric world and then moving into something that's considered tremendous customer value, they are very agile in shaping and changing their product to fit the market needs and to fit the end customer. So what happens is that the initial idea of what the product is and what they're, driven by passion and driven by a first realization of what the market gap is, fundamentally gets changed by the partnerships and the engagements that you have with potential investors or large customers. And if you have that agility, then you'll be able to shift and change your product. There are others who have worked closely with Microsoft, and we've seen in firsthand, both as a customer of theirs, right, as a potential partner from a startup perspective. They start from offering a service to a customer, a set of customers, and then they realize, well, this service is repeatable, scalable, and this is something that most people need. So we need to productize this, and we need to make sure that we fit this market gap instead of offering this either as a service or seeing others offer it as a service. So they want to kind of scale by building a digital product. So let me then observe how the second scenario works. The second scenario is we have a compelling offer, a compelling service, and the reason why this is compelling is probably a one-time offer to a customer, a POC, a pilot, you can call it whatever you want, is because it hits a few marks. It is offering an existing service that's cheaper 10x than what you can find currently in the market, because it disrupts the current way of people thinking about this. It offers a very high quality of service and very high customer centricity. So it offers different aspects based on which most of your customers would be saying, well, you clearly have a differentiator. And there are some incumbents in the market. Let me take an example of a typical marketing agency. So marketing agency would be offering you filming services. They would be offering you marketing services. They would be offering you different kinds of services. They're all very high touch. They're built on a traditional agency model from like 20 years ago, and they're mostly operating in the same way. Now, a new company comes in, a disruptor, and say, I can offer this as a scalable product, and I can offer this as a very cheap service, light touch, which can be filming on demand, most of the things done digitally. You upload your videos online. There's a follow the sun 24/7 model where editors around the world are editing your content. I guarantee high level of service and quality. I do have digital tools such as AI augmented editing tools, which means that you can literally say what you want and the tool is going to make changes and edits for you. So I'm disrupting the way the typical traditional agencies are thinking of this, as in they have big crews, they have very expensive operations, they also have a multi-tier subcontracting. So I'm disrupting this way. I'm moving into with digital tech, different way of thinking, and I'm quantifying my service or my product based on a following a few things. I'm cheaper than what exists in the market. I offer more agility, so my service can be turned around in 1 hour or even 5 minutes or 1 minute, right? Versus something that's market standard, which can be 1 day. So there are these things that I call acceptable pain, which means that acceptable pain for most companies is that they are expecting an SLA of 3 days for something to get done. And people don't even think about it. This is so ingrained in the way they think that whoever comes in and says, actually, you don't need to wait for 3 days. We can get it done in 1 hour. Nobody would believe you, right? Everybody would say you're crazy. But that's the mindset of a disruptor. Like, how can I get this done cheaper, faster, and potentially even higher service level, right? And when you talk to the key audiences, you need to understand what exactly are they looking for. Some companies might be saying, okay, cheaper, fair, but I'm really into high quality and I'm into more agility. Funding I have. Now COVID comes, this, a lot of issues in the market, cash flow problems. Maybe now funding becomes the main driver. So you need to really understand when you talk to your potential customers, what's the key driver for them? And you can have a state-of-the-art product. They will not look at you unless you're hitting the mark on a few of these dots where they have a big pain. And then you need to understand what's an accepted pain for them. If the accepted pain is something that they take things for granted, like two days to particularly deliver this service, or this needs to cost X $1,000 and it's impossible to get it cheaper, then you're making money because you've cracked a part of the market which where you're thinking differently and where you can open the eyes of your customers. And the first thing they're going to say is like, show me how. And then you have them. And then they're willing to give you a POC or a pilot. And after that, when you show that traction, then VCs will come in. Everybody else is going to come in because they don't need to validate you. You already have validation with the large enterprises, which is why I'm so big on having large customers go into POCing with you, piloting, partnering with you on shaping your product. If you don't have that, very hard to make market traction.
That's a fantastic point. If you have big brands, big logos on your pitch deck that, hey, I have done a paid pilot with these customers, that goes a long way for the new customer traction or for the VC funding. One thing that I sort of concluded from your opinions is that you can't have very static value proposition. It has to be very fluid, very dynamic based on what are the micro trends, who you are talking to, how goals and objectives of your customer persona are changing. If their goals and objectives were on saving cost earlier, and now it is more on increasing revenue or increasing SLA, then you have to modify your value proposition accordingly, right? Now, one concern or one issue that startups always have is that they don't have those muscle power to get all the required information from their customers. So, for example, there's a startup which is doing a paid pilot with, let's say, Walmart or Target. These are giants, right? And you want to get all the information from them about their use case, how much money they are saving or how much revenue increment they are seeing because of their solution and things of that nature. But because these are giants, they probably won't share their information with you. And you still want to do the pilot because these are the fantastic logos to have on the pitch deck. In those kind of situations, you have done the paid pilot. Now you want to go to other customers and VCs that, hey, we have done the paid pilot with this giant, but I don't have a way to quantify the value proposition because I didn't get any data from these giants. How do you recommend to deal with those kind of situations? George, I'll start with you.
Sorry, I'm muted. Very interesting example. I would say two things. I think number one is compared to a decade ago, it seems a lot of things happened in the last decade, right? The amount of data that we have from the omnipresent devices that has become so prolific is scary. So I remember making this point to a customer that today we are generating 10 times the data that US Library of Congress, right, in a single day today. It means in a single day, we're generating the equivalent of what is 10x of all the books and data in the US Library of Congress. So to say there is no data is itself an oxymoron. But the question is, where do you find the data? Because that's the new oil. That's point one. So my point is, there is no such thing as no data. The question is, are you imaginative enough to go get the data? Now, my second point, let me be specific. You picked up a very interesting Walmart example, which is a big brand, right? Customer of ours as well. Is if you are pitching a value to its equivalent, and the equivalent of a Walmart doesn't want to share data with you, that itself speaks a lot of things. So keep your headlights on. But let's assume they don't. You can get around that quite easily. There is so much expertise today that we can do that. Let me give you a very specific example. So AR is not a very new technology, but of course, the resolution, the latency, and all that does vary from partner to partner. We do that as well. And what we do is we offer this service to banks. As you know, IBM is very big in banks. On banks with a lot of ATMs scattered around big countries. Don't think Singapore, think Thailand, think US and all that. Every time an ATM breaks down, the truck rolls you have to spend just to send somebody down there to fix it, it's very expensive. So we deploy AR with customers like this, where we guide through AR goggles, right? Think Iron Man, right? You wear that goggle, and then suddenly you can see what the technician on site sees, and you guide the technician through solving and resolving the problem of the ATM. So why am I telling you this real life story? It's because, to your example, Pankaj, if I were somebody who's doing this solution through AR, I can easily deploy this simple AR solution, write up a few APIs, all open source, by the way. And by putting such cameras into that particular store, depending on what you're tracking. So if you're giving an example of having a solution where you're offering to the Walmart competitor and you're trying to say this particular interactive interface help drives up sales because customer coming in can get their resolution resolved, you can simply put a simple solution together through AR on speech to text conversion, calculate the interaction time with a customer, correlate that data with revenue from a year-to-year, month-to-month perspective, correlate that data with restocking, correlate that data with essentially what is the causation between the interaction time with the amount of revenue and the stockouts that a particular customer or that retail store has. So my point is, you can get this data. It is not impossible. It's just how imaginative you want to be. And I'll end off by saying this, right? If you ever meet somebody who says, I don't have data to give you, let's assume this is so strange that he cannot give you any data, go create your own data. What do I mean by that? So we work with many customers, and actually I wouldn't say the name, but it was a fairly big bank, right, in Singapore. They were saying, oh shit, man, I got to do something on digital transformation. It's like, that's the buzzword. It's like everybody is going on digital transformation. But what exactly am I supposed to do? I don't know where to start off. So it's a technology looking for a solution, looking for a problem. So what we did with them was that we did this design thinking process. We sat them down. We tried to understand what their core competencies was. And then we actually deployed few agents. We got a couple of smart interns from Ivy League universities, camped outside the bank, busiest branches, calculated, collected data on queuing time, customer interaction time, so on and so forth. And then use that data to correlate with the big problems that they feel they had. And then they deploy the technology to solve that biggest problem and gap in that bank. And today that bank is quite happy with us. So you can create your own data, and you can be imaginative about how you can use API today to go collect data that you felt didn't exist. I hope that kind of gives you a sense.
Interesting. So essentially, you need to send your spy. You need to do all kind of research, get into the rabbit hole, and probably imagine about the data that hey, these could be the assumption about this use case, and this could be the data, and so on and so forth, right? But you have to ultimately come back with some kind of data and quantification of the value proposition. Fantastic. BoonThai, what's your opinion on that?
So the question is whether or not, or how do you quantify the value, right? I think depending on where you are in the startup life, like you could be at a stage where, or depending on the products as well, right? Some of them, it's pretty easy for you to quantify. I think everybody that started up, you're here to solve a world problem. And when you're solving a problem, you have some ideas, hopefully how to kind of quantify it, right? Like the gentleman just now, what's his name? Jason, with the bento machine. That's revenue generating, obviously, right? Like, you know, roughly what you're trying to solve. The question is, the process of engaging with your first prospect or the first set of customers, what does that engagement looks like? Are you just simply saying, hey, we're new, right? We can do this. And would you like to try? Oh, let's do a proof of concept. There's got to be some sort of criteria on, okay, what's a successful proof of concept? And, you know, if you want to push a little bit more, you could say, okay, well, let's talk about, you know, because proof of concept in a way for a startup, you're giving them a lot. I know, you know, from a lot of startup mindset, you know, you need the customer, right? You, in your back of your mind, you're thinking you're desperate, but be confident of yourself, right? Like, you are solving something for the customers as well. So don't take yourself for granted on that, right? Like, go and ask for upfront, right? Ask for, well, okay, fine, I'm going to do this proof of concept for you, right? Let's define what the success criteria is, and let's talk about what we can do if that's success criteria is met, right? So in a way, whether or not you get data, it's not that easy, I know, right? But you have some level of control over it when you are talking to customers, right? And it's a collaboration effort as well, because, you know, obviously the customer needs to be willing to work with you and needs to be comfortable with giving you this information as well, right? But typically, even for a company of Walmart size, they would appreciate you being quantitative on a proof of concept, I would imagine, right? Like, I think it's more of your own mindset and your own approach to this, right? Because if I'm a startup, it's easy for me to say, hey, I'm working with a giant, or they're willing to do a proof of concept. Okay, let's just sign up. Well, fine. What the success looks like for this proof of concept, right? What's the consequence if it's successful? Because you could even be losing money doing this proof of concept. I hope you're not, right? But man, gosh, if you're losing money doing this proof of concept, I pray that you are asking for something in return if it's successful, right? And how do you know if it's successful? That's my mindset, and I hope this sort of sets you. I think first mindset, secondly your own mindset, secondly having a methodology on, okay, here's defined process of how I'm going to approach this as a startup will help you. And no, it's not going to work with everybody you meet with, because you may meet with some asshole and some and like no offense, CMOs, right? Like, marketing are the hardest people to negotiate with, because they negotiate with vendors every day, right? But doesn't mean that you stop because you met someone that's really hard to negotiate with and say no to you, right? As a startup, you have to take rejections, and you have to keep your chin up and keep going, right? Believe in yourself. That's what I would say, right? But if you as the startup owner don't know how to kind of quantify, or don't know where your saving is, then you're in trouble already, right? But I would say that people buy for 3 reasons, right? This is what the salespeople would say, all right? They buy because they're in trouble, they buy because they see trouble coming, and they buy because it makes them feel good, or it appeals to their ego, right? So when you're selling something, you're selling towards one of these 3, right? There are many methodology on how you define value and stuff like that, right? Like I won't go into all of them, but
right.
Yeah, I think that this should be enough. I don't want to take all the time away. I think Borko probably have some ideas you want to share as well.
Definitely. Thanks a lot, BoonThai. Borko, what is your opinion on this so far?
Yeah, I 100% agree with Reese, just the comment around sales, because we're all sellers, right? No matter which role you are, you're in sales. You're selling to internal stakeholders, external. You're selling to customers, pilots, full products. Doesn't matter. And when I was going through my sales coaching training, one of my sales coaches told me when I was presenting to him the actual close plan for one deal, he said, so who's going to lose their job if this doesn't get signed? And I was like, I don't know, maybe the CISO, maybe, the CTO. And he's like, no,
you.
One person and give me one person and give me the date after which he will lose his job if this doesn't get signed, right? Because if there's no compelling reason for them to sign, they won't sign, right? So as said, either they're in trouble or they're trying to, get out of trouble in the near future. So there needs to be some reason why they're engaging with you in this this project and this partnership. Now, what I think when it comes to enterprise partnerships, and that's why I say I'm very big on companies working with bigger brands, because enterprises are extremely complex. And if you're able, and that's why some investors are asking you to demonstrate market traction with a large brand or a big logo that's a partner or a customer or even an investor, right? Depending on how well you've integrated with them. It's because solving that, not just for market fit and product fit, solving for your understanding and your ability to be agile enough and flexible to land your product or your solution into a very complex environment that exists in many of these large enterprises. Walmart, extremely complex. Microsoft, crazy house. Like, IBM, probably the same. So all these companies, extremely complex. And if you think that you're selling to one individual that has this problem, and if you manage to sell it to him, her, or their team, you're wrong. So you need to understand that whoever is your sponsor and your buyer in that company, that person has an extreme level of complexity behind him or her, and that they need to navigate and manage that complexity. When I joined Microsoft like 15 years ago, I was trying to, you always try to position your like server products back then. There was no cloud, there was no business decision makers making any decisions. Everything was IT. IT was under finance. So it was a group of weird people sitting probably in a basement, right? Coding or managing servers, right? Nothing as sophisticated as today. So we were selling to CIOs, or they were IT managers back then. Nowadays, all these decisions are being made by a number of people, and they're, CMOs are decision makers. HR is the decision maker. Like, business is really heavily impacting all these decisions around products, especially in your case, because you're not just focusing on pure IT products, you're everywhere. So what I mean to say is that once you identify who's your main stakeholder, try to understand his or her perspective of what kind of complexity they're dealing with within their organization to help them sell it internally, because they also need to sell it internally. There's no single person making a decision. And in order to do that, in most cases, it's not enough that you go in and say, look, I'm super deep in this niche. I solved this problem like no one else. You need to understand what are the adjacent markets to your own product. What are the potential partnerships that you can build so that you can make a more holistic value proposition to your end customer? And when you become a bigger part of their puzzle, not a tiny small thing that just plugs in as one bolt and they screw it in and that's it. If you're a tiny bolt, then they treat you like that. Then you become a part of the machinery, but you don't really get access to this data. You don't get access to finding around how the machine works. You just, screw the bolt, tell them if it works or not. If it works, payments there, you maybe get a customer case study or a logo, but that's it. If you're a part of the bigger piece of the machinery, they want you in constantly. They want you and your partners in. So you might want to build a bigger piece, which is not just one bolt, which might be a few pieces of that machinery. And then when you go in and say, okay, listen, we've partnered with these 10 other companies which are delivering this kind of value, and we think that we can, really be a good partner to you, then the companies are thinking, well, this makes sense, because if we make this a bigger POC, then obviously more impact to the company, we can sell it easier. But then also you get to be more relevant in their company, and you get access to that data, and you can collaborate with all these ecosystem partners that you've built. So for me, partnerships are key for you to make traction. The bigger you are, the more partnerships you need to get in the market, and you need to think hard, who should be my partner? If I'm delivering on the front-end solution, who's the back-end guy that I can work with? APIs, which ones can I leverage on? Who is the integration partner? How can I work on becoming part of something bigger? If you're able to do that, you'll be more relevant to your enterprise customers. If you're just, again, one small piece, then others will probably keep you in the dark.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really glad that you talked about this point, Borko, because, and I see that every time, that startups are highly concentrated on what problem statement they are solving, what solution they are offering, right? But many times they forget about all other ecosystem partners within that network, right? So your point is that partnering with complementary solution providers, or probably partnering with system integrators, is extremely crucial for startups to be successful at enterprise sales. Fantastic. Now, I just want to make sure that we are able to answer questions from the audience as well. So is there any questions from the audience so far? Please don't be shy. Feel free to ask questions. Okay, 3, 2, 1. No questions. By the way, I love this discussion between George and Jason so far. That's fantastic. We want to make it more interactive. Now, one question that I'm really passionate about: what are the idols or go-to places that you have when you have to sort of sharpen your value proposition skills? Or I know that you have probably 20 years of experience with the value proposition, but still, are there any such places or idols that you sort of go after to learn more and understand more? Okay, I'll start with George.
Yeah, thanks. I don't think there's a single magical place that you can go like Alice would go when she wants to, have fun, right? The reality is there is no such place. At least I'm not aware. Typically, when we want to do a value proposition testing, I think Borko mentioned this quite prolifically around the ecosystem. It's very important, right? So I would say, at least in my early years, when I was doing product marketing and all that, the data is one thing. After you got everything buttoned down, does it speak to the market? Does it speak to the segment? What I always found useful was to test it out, right, with your immediate stakeholder. So imagine a set of concentric circles. The first concentric circle essentially would be the end users that you speak to, because if you don't even get that through, game over. But you also find that to sustain that value, your concentric circle will have linkage of a sphere of influence to the next concentric circle, because their end user is also the customer. So you test out with the partners that deal with your end users. Do they feel that, right? So that is something that as you keep doing that and you keep asking why, you'll get them rock solid in building that out. The other thing I like to do, since you use the word spy, is I love to attend Microsoft events, AWS events, Google events, because really, they partner with IBM, but they also compete with IBM. And what better way to learn is to learn from your competitor, because especially in some areas, Microsoft's better, in some areas, Concur's better. So also attend and see how they are positioning themselves, because they will give you a lot of very good ideas as well, right? So I think broadly, those are the immediate areas that I think if you do that constant refining through some of this feedback, feedback loop, like what we do very often with agile practices and methodology, you will get there. And my last parting comment is, the current era is, don't wait for a perfect solution, right? I mean, you're in the business of selling, as Borko said. You just want to get the first dollar of growth. When you have something, get it out, test it, and always do continuous optimization. You think the online commerce of the world gets it right whenever they know where to put their merchandise, how they put up their value prop for their customer. You think the pricing they put there is always perfect? No, right? It's trial. You test it, you refine it, you improve it, and that's the way you should go about doing it.
Fantastic. Thanks a lot, George. I'll come back to Borko again on the go to places or idols.
Yeah, I agree with George. I don't think there's a single place. Like if you definitely need that sounding board, right? Which if you're a startup, then you need a sounding board of partners. Again, I'm coming back to this because it's critical. Today in an enterprise corporate world, you won't get anything done without partnerships internally. So IT is partnering with other departments, and other departments need to partner with everyone. So lots of these kind of ecosystem partnerships. But also if you're a startup or you're a small company, you need to understand who's playing in your market, who's playing in the markets which are similar to yours. And what I would be looking for is who is offering a value proposition that's very similar to what I'm trying to do, but maybe has a gap in their offering. I would partner with them and see, is this something that's compelling to customers that you work with? And I work now with a lot of financial services customers and in the fintech space. So there's a lot of things around payments and merchant onboarding and KYC and all these things and digital wallets, and a lot of conversations around how that's going to look like with blockchain coming in with different aspects. Not a single startup that I met is offering everything end to end, and every enterprise that we work with is looking for a more holistic, robust solution. So instead of waiting for that enterprise to come back to you and say, how about KYC? How about core banking? How about this? How about that? How about asking you 10 different things? And you're like, okay, let me look in the market. Who can I get in to help me with this? Be proactive. Try to preempt what they're going to look for, and then test waters. Ask these other companies, hey, have you come across, when you work with your customers, a missing value proposition in this space? And then they would be like, yeah, sure, we've always left it to the customer to figure things out. But, let me take a look what you have, and I'll let you know if that was in demand. So test yourself around, not necessarily with customers. You can obviously do that, but test with the market partners, because the market partners are not only going to help you validate if there's a market for your stuff and if they can partner with you, but they will also be a potential access to the market, because they are the ones that already talk to these customers. And sometimes you can have a much easier access. They're going straight to the customers, again, as a small piece of the puzzle. So my validation is always with the ecosystem, with the partners, to see if this is something that would hold true in the open market. And then, of course, when you're doing all these, customer POCs and customer pilots, always seek for validation and always try to, as we discussed early on, try to set up how the success look like. And then once you're able to do that, then you won't be doing, even if you do a free POC and you're losing money, you know why you're doing that, right? So I love that statement that you should know why you're doing things. And many times startups are like, oh my God, let me just get this one customer or two customers, just a logo, just so I can put on the website. I'm free, I'm okay to do everything for free. And then you end up really getting sucked in, and you think that you're doing more and more and you're building your traction, but eventually you're just losing money, you're losing resources. And as the outcome of that, you might not get what you want because they cut you off, you don't have access to data, you have no learnings from the pilot. So you need to be very clear on how you're managing that own engagement with the customers.
Fantastic. BoonThai.
Borko, when you were speaking, I was thinking of kind of interesting experience when we used to be able to travel, and we would go to Japan. Something interesting about Japan is that when you're walking down the street, people give you like packets of tissue papers free, right? I don't know if you guys have ever experienced that, but it's got advertisement printed on it. And my sister lived in Japan for like 10 years, right? Doing marketing. She's down in Denmark. So I sat down, we walked through this street, sat down with her, and she said, oh, no one wants them. And then she opens up a pack of tissue paper that she bought from 7-Eleven over there. I'm like, why don't you use the one that people give you for free? Oh, I don't know, it's probably printed with bad chemical and stuff like that. Like the interesting thing is that people don't relate value with free, right? If you're doing stuff for free, there's zero value in that. I say it just now, right? It's in the eye of a beholder. If you want to sharpen your value proposition, figure out how to increase the price of it. There's price and value are two sides of the same equation. I ask people all the time, right? Like my team, like why did we not win this deal, or what happened there? Oh, the customer don't see the value. Oh, we're too expensive. What's the difference there? It's the same thing, right? Like there's and it's interesting because my marketing team added this drop down in the CRM saying, okay, why do we not win, right? Customer don't see the value, price too expensive. I'm like, it's the same thing, right? Like, so understanding that is very important in my mind, right? As far as sorry, Pankaj, I kind of deviate away from your question, but I think this is related as well, right? I don't think there's much to say aside from, yes, you go to the customer, you go to the partners, but ultimately it's the customers that give you aspiration on how to sharpen your value proposition. But I think if you want to be scientific about it, right, there are really two types of ideas, right? I would call them the innovation and the evolution. The innovation is where you come up with something and you don't know if it works, but you think it will work, right? You came up with the idea. So yeah, you need to test, as George is saying, right? Go to your close affiliate, etc., etc. And then there's the evolution, which personally, I love innovation, but I think the easiest way to get something done is through evolution. And what I mean is you evolve around something that already exists, meaning that you go to the customer and you say, what's your pain point, right? In terms of how you solve that pain point, it could disrupt, it could be innovative as well, right? But you start with what problem you're trying to solve rather than, as George was saying just now, right, in his example, you're solving a problem rather than you starting with an idea. Yes, you are doing a startup. Yes, you have your idea, but it doesn't stop you from sitting down with the customer and saying, here, I'm doing this thing around, in the case of Stayer, right? Like you are trying to help. I guess I don't know enough about your company, but it sounds like it's a pretty cool solution in trying to comment or monetize outly, right? Yeah, and it would be going to related company and saying, I have this idea, but I would love to hear what your thoughts around what this can do for you. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, go to the potential prospect. Don't just present to them and say what I'm solving for you. Ask them, talk to them, right? You don't have to be the guy presenting for an hour. You could be the guy that share some idea, but be upfront that I would love to get your thoughts and ideas as well, right? Because that's how you sharpen, right? So I guess I'm taking this from a theoretical level that George and Borko is sharing, and taking it to a pragmatic level where, how do you exercise it is just going and talking to customers and asking questions, right? If that makes sense.
Fantastic. So there's no alternate of talking to the customer. You have to talk to the customer to understand what value you're creating. So I know
there is an oracle next to my house that we can go and pray on. I heard it's very, very good.
Yeah. No, you don't need to pray to Oracle. You just need to buy Watson API. We can predict the future for you. I'm just kidding. That's kidding.
That's fantastic marketing.
Even then, you need a lot of data.
Oh yeah, of course. Just like you go pray to the Oracle, you gotta bring a lot of incense. You just now bring me data.
Yes.
We are in the last minute of the panel. Generally, I request panelists to give one key takeaway. But today I'll be slightly creative and I'll ask attendees to talk about one key takeaway that they are walking with. And I hope nobody, leaves the meeting because of that. But Jason, what is the one key takeaway that you are taking from today's panel?
From my side, I really like the terms sell internal. I always have this problem of sell internal of my machine.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Jason. Gauri, what is your key takeaway?
So firstly, I think identifying not just what need that the solution that you're building can solve, but what is the larger need that is there in the market? What are the kind of gaps that you can fulfill? And always, being open to maybe helping it serve a larger solution that you had not anticipated in the beginning.
Fantastic. Thanks a lot. Toby?
Yeah, I think there's not just one point to take away here today. I think there's multiple points to be taken away. I think one of the things that are most relevant to what we are doing over here at STEA is to really just to be more engaged, right? With all these multiple partners that we're trying to work with, like hotels, international chains or boutique chains, private owners, private property owners or commercial property owners, to not just present, but also to really find out what are the kind of problems that they're facing with, from day to day, especially with the current climate that, this pandemic never happened before. Every day they're actually coming up with new problems and new issues. How do we not just by offering them what we offer, but better elevate on what we can actually do for them on top of our existing ecosystem? So I think that itself will really help us to engage with even more partners and help us to grow really a lot faster as well.
Fantastic. Thank you, Toby. Janir?
Well, so from my side, I would say that the most important, and I hear it a lot from the guys, is no matter what's the product is, which level is the product is, just take it to the market, validate it with the clients, get the feedback, and improve. I mean, don't wait and wait and wait, because otherwise you can just miss the market or just don't understand what is the customer needs. So whatever you develop, take it, test it, see how it goes, and take it from there.
Fantastic. Thanks a lot, Yaniv. Peter?
Yeah, hi. Yeah, it's okay. Very good. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I think it's already 3 minutes over. So again, thanks a lot for all the amazing insights, and I know behind these insights there's probably 100 years of experience, right? So I really appreciate that. Really, thank you for all the opinions that you shared. And I think I'm walking ahead with key takeaway that we definitely need to find the right kind of partners who are providing complementary solutions or who are helping the same kind of customers, right? We definitely need to talk to customer as much as possible, because if we are not talking, then we are not really learning much about customers' use case and their problem statement and things of that nature. And no free pilots, no free lunches, right? So I think these are the key interesting thing that I found from the panel today. Again, thanks a lot for the discussion, and I'll speak to you soon. Take care. Stay safe.
Thank you. Take care, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.